Stand on a rocky rise at the future Tsim Sha Tsui waterfront 500 years ago and look south. Across the water, Hong Kong Island is there, but the city is missing. No skyscrapers, no Bank of China Tower, no IFC, no Star Ferry, no tunnels beneath the harbor, no neon reflections stretching across the water. Instead, forest covers the steep slopes of the island. Small coastal settlements sit beside sheltered bays. Fishing boats move slowly through deep natural water, while farmers work narrow pieces of usable land between mountain and sea. Hong Kong is often remembered as a place that grew from a fishing village, but that is too simple. Long before the modern skyline, this was already a living maritime landscape of villages, trade routes, farms, boat communities, and coastal markets linked to southern China. Now keep watching the harbor. Foreign sailing ships will arrive. A war fought partly over trade and opium will place Hong Kong Island under British control. A colonial city will rise across the water. The shoreline will move outward. Kowloon itself will change sovereignty. Japanese forces will invade. War will empty streets that once seemed unstoppable. Then refugees will arrive in enormous numbers. Factories will fill Kowloon. Squatter settlements will climb hillsides. A single fire will help transform public housing. Apartment towers will rise where temporary huts once stood. Cars will pass beneath the harbor. Then trains will follow underground. Factories will give way to finance. The city will reclaim land from the sea, then eventually try to protect the harbor from further reclamation. In 1997, sovereignty will change again. Yet the ferries will keep crossing. The harbor will remain. This is the evolution of Hong Kong. It stands near the future Tsim Sha Tsui waterfront at the southern edge of Kowloon, looking south across Victoria Harbour toward northern Hong Kong Island. Victoria Peak rises behind the opposite shore. Later, Central will dominate the waterfront below it. Ships, ferries, naval vessels, cargo traffic, and cruise ships will pass through the same water. And one feature will matter more than almost anything else: the shoreline. Hong Kong will not only build upward, it will repeatedly build outward. Land will be created where water once existed, and some of the future city's most valuable streets and towers will stand on reclaimed ground. Go back several centuries. The name Victoria Harbour does not yet exist. Neither does modern Tsim Sha Tsui. Across the water, the steep northern shore of Hong Kong Island offers little flat land. Mountains rise quickly from the sea. But the harbor itself is exceptional. Deep, sheltered, and strategically positioned, it connects the Pearl River Delta with the South China Sea. Fishing vessels move between coastal communities. Wooden junks carry goods. Farmers cultivate rice and vegetables where the terrain allows. Some families live much of their lives on boats. This is not a global financial center, but it is already part of a larger maritime world. Storms are one of the great forces shaping daily life. There are no concrete seawalls, radar systems, or satellite forecasts. A powerful typhoon can scatter boats, destroy homes, and erase months of work in a single night. Yet fishing resumes, markets reopen, people rebuild. For generations, the harbor supports life long before anyone imagines towers covering the shore. Then foreign ships begin appearing in increasing numbers. By the 18th and early 19th centuries, European merchants are deeply involved in trade with China. Tea flows toward Britain. Silver flows in the opposite direction. British merchants increasingly sell Indian opium into China. The Qing government attempts to suppress the trade. Tensions become war. In 1839, the First Opium War begins. British naval power dominates much of the coastal fighting. In January 1841, British forces occupy Hong Kong Island. The Treaty of Nanking in 1842 formally cedes the island to Britain. But across the harbor, an entirely new settlement begins to appear. Trees are cleared, tracks become roads, Warehouses rise near the waterfront. Military and government buildings follow. A colonial city called Victoria starts growing between mountain and sea. And almost immediately, the shortage of flat land becomes obvious. Hong Kong Island has a problem that will define its future. There is very little usable flat land. The mountains rise too steeply behind the settlement, while the harbor lies directly in front. So the city begins moving the shoreline. Earth, rock, and construction debris are dumped into shallow coastal water behind retaining structures. The harbor becomes land. New roads and buildings appear farther from the original coastline. A waterfront building that once stood beside the sea can eventually find itself several streets inland. This becomes one of Hong Kong's defining habits. When the mountains block expansion, the city pushes outward into the water. The Second Opium War ends with another Qing defeat. In 1860, the southern part of Kowloon Peninsula is ceded to Britain. But the border has crossed over it. Yesterday, this viewpoint stood in Qing territory, looking toward British Hong Kong. Now both sides of the harbor are under British administration. Wharves expand, military facilities appear. Roads spread through Kowloon. Markets and communities grow behind the waterfront. Then, in 1898, Britain obtains a 99-year lease over the new territories and many surrounding islands. Hong Kong is no longer simply an island colony. It has become a much larger territory built around the harbor, and the harbor is becoming an engine. By the late 19th century, Victoria Harbour is crowded with movement. Ocean-going steamships anchor beside traditional sailing vessels. Cargo moves through warehouses. Dock workers carry tea, rice, coal, and manufactured goods. Small craft weave between much larger ships. Across the water, Victoria becomes denser. Banks, churches, government buildings, and commercial blocks climb along the narrow strip beneath Victoria Peak. A ferry. Regular steam ferry services expand in the late 19th century, and the Star Ferry becomes one of the harbor's most enduring institutions. Empires will change, wars will come, road tunnels and railways will be built, skyscrapers will cover the shore, but the ferry keeps crossing. The harbor remains dangerous. Typhoons still arrive. Ships need warnings. In 1883, the Hong Kong Observatory is established in Kowloon. Meteorological observation becomes more systematic. Storm warnings improve. Signals appear over the city. Hong Kong is beginning to use science to manage one of the natural forces that has shaped life here for centuries. But no technology can remove the danger completely. Even in the future, powerful storms will still stop ferries, close schools, empty streets, and remind the city that the harbor is not merely scenery. It is part of the environment that made Hong Kong possible. Enter the 1900s. The skyline is still low compared with what will come later, but the city is unmistakably urban. Electric lights spread. Trams move along Hong Kong Island. The Peak Tram climbs the mountain. Roads become busier. Steamships and ferries crowd the water. Reclamation continues. The northern shore of Hong Kong Island moves farther into Victoria Harbour. Hong Kong is discovering a pattern it will repeat for decades. Build upward when land is scarce. Build outward when the shoreline can be moved. Connect everything with transport. Then the Pacific War reaches Hong Kong. December 1941. Japanese forces attack Hong Kong. British, Canadian, Indian, and local forces defend the territory. The fighting moves through the new territories in Kowloon, then across Victoria Harbour. Peaceful shipping gives way to military movement. Smoke rises around the waterfront. Aircraft cross the sky. Artillery flashes in the distance. After 18 days of fighting, British forces surrender on Christmas Day. Hong Kong enters Japanese occupation. British symbols disappear. Food becomes scarce. Trade collapses. The population falls sharply as many residents leave. The harbor that had become a commercial machine is now part of an occupied wartime city. For almost 4 years, Hong Kong's growth is interrupted. Then Japan surrenders in 1945. Ships return, businesses reopen, and the city enters one of the fastest periods of change in its history. The war ends, but China is still changing violently. Civil war on the mainland and the communist victory in 1949 drive new waves of people into Hong Kong. Some are returning residents, others are refugees, entrepreneurs, workers, and families seeking safety or opportunity. The population rises rapidly. Every piece of land becomes valuable. Hillsides around Kowloon fill with squatter settlements built from timber, sheet metal, and salvaged materials. Workshops appear beneath homes. Factories occupy cramped buildings. People produce garments, toys, watches, plastic goods, and electronics. Hong Kong has very little land and few natural resources, but it has labor, skills, capital, a deep-water port, and access to global markets. The city begins shifting from trading port to manufacturing powerhouse. Then, one disaster changes housing policy. Christmas night, 1953. Fire breaks out in the enormous squatter settlement at Shek Kip Mei. Flames spread rapidly through tightly packed wooden homes. By morning, tens of thousands of people are homeless. The colonial government can no longer treat squatter housing as a temporary problem. Multi-story resettlement blocks begin rising. The earliest buildings are basic: tiny rooms, shared toilets, shared washing areas, almost no privacy. But they represent the beginning of large-scale public housing. Over the following decades, concrete estates spread across Kowloon, Hong Kong Island, and the new territories. The vertical city is not built only by banks and office towers. It is also built by the need to house millions of ordinary people on very limited land. Hong Kong learns a simple lesson: if there is no space left horizontally, build upward. Apartment blocks multiply, factories expand, industrial districts fill with workers. Delivery trucks crowd the roads. Cargo ships leave the harbor carrying textiles, garments, toys, watches, and electronics. The words "Made in Hong Kong" appear on products around the world. Manufacturing becomes one of the foundations of the economy. But economic success creates a transport crisis. More people need to cross the harbor every day. The Star Ferry cannot handle everything, so Hong Kong goes beneath the water. In 1972, the Cross Harbor Tunnel opens. Cars vanish under Victoria Harbour and emerge on the opposite side. The harbor is no longer only crossed on the surface, it is crossed underneath. Then the railway system expands. In 1979, the MTR begins operation. Over time, trains spread beneath streets, mountains, and eventually the harbor. The visible city climbs upward while some of its most important infrastructure disappears underground. The 1980s bring another transformation. China begins reforming and opening its economy. Manufacturing gradually shifts from Hong Kong into the Pearl River Delta, where land and labor are cheaper. Hong Kong does not simply decline, it changes function. Finance grows, trade services expand. Shipping remains important, professional services become more valuable. Management, banking, and investment increasingly replace factory production. The skyline begins taking the form the world recognizes today. The HSBC headquarters rises. Then the Bank of China Tower cuts sharply into the sky. Glass and steel replace older commercial blocks. Land prices climb. The harbor is now surrounded by a city moving from manufacturing center to global service economy. And one date is approaching that everyone knows: 1997. The new territories were leased to Britain for 99 years in 1898. That lease will expire in 1997. By the late 20th century, however, the new territories are inseparable from the rest of Hong Kong. Millions of people live there. Roads, railways, reservoirs, and housing estates link the territory together. Britain and China negotiate Hong Kong's future. The result is an agreement that all of Hong Kong will return to Chinese sovereignty. Yet construction does not stop. Office towers continue rising, transport networks expand, an enormous new airport is built at Chek Lap Kok. Hong Kong is preparing physically for the future, even while its political future is being rewritten. Night falls over Victoria Harbour. Rain darkens the city. Ceremonies begin. British and colonial Hong Kong flags are lowered. At midnight, the national flag of the People's Republic of China and the flag of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region are raised. More than a century and a half of British administration ends. Hong Kong becomes a special administrative region of China under the framework of one country, two systems. Almost nothing physical changes at midnight. The towers remain, the roads remain, the harbor remains. The ferries continue crossing. Political sovereignty has changed. The city itself keeps moving. Then, 1 year later, another familiar part of Hong Kong disappears. For decades, aircraft approaching Kai Tak Airport descend dramatically over Kowloon. Passenger jets appear impossibly low above apartment blocks before turning toward the runway. It becomes one of Hong Kong's most famous sights, but the city has grown around the airport. There is no room left. In July 1998, the new international airport at Chek Lap Kok opens. Kai Tak closes. The aircraft suddenly disappear from Kowloon's rooftops. The old airport land begins another life as redevelopment territory. Once again, Hong Kong takes a place built for one era and gives it an entirely different purpose. Now compare the water with our opening view. Both shorelines have moved. Hong Kong Island has pushed north. Kowloon has pushed south. Not through geology, through engineering. Reclamation has created land for roads, railways, offices, and public facilities. But by the late 20th century, opposition to further reclamation grows. Victoria Harbour is not simply unused water. It is the city's visual center, transport corridor, and historical identity. Hong Kong spent generations taking land from the harbour. Now it begins placing stronger limits on how much more can be taken. The relationship has changed again. First, the harbour allowed the city to grow. Then, the city consumed parts of the harbour. Now, the city must protect what remains. Enter the 21st century. IFC rises above Central. Dense office and apartment towers cover the shore. Kowloon grows upward too. Rail stations, hotels, shopping centers, and cultural buildings crowd the waterfront. At night, glass towers reflect colored light into the harbor. Victoria Peak still rises behind the city, but now it appears almost like a backdrop to the skyline. Hong Kong has become one of the world's most recognizable urban landscapes. Yet, density brings pressure. Housing remains expensive, land remains scarce. Transport systems must move millions efficiently. Typhoons still arrive. Extreme rain still floods streets. The harbor itself must be protected from pollution created by the megacity around it. Modern Hong Kong is not a victory over geography. It is a continuing negotiation with geography. The year is 2026. Look south. Where forested slopes once descended towards scattered coastal communities, one of Asia's most famous skylines now rises. The Bank of China Tower cuts into the sky. IFC dominates the waterfront. Apartment towers climb the hills. Roads and railways move through and beneath the city. Ferries leave white wakes across the harbor. Cruise ships and commercial vessels share water once dominated by fishing boats and coastal traders. Much of the modern waterfront stands on land that did not exist in the 19th century. And yet the original geography still controls everything. Victoria Peak remains behind the skyline. The harbor still separates Kowloon and Hong Kong Island. Typhoons still arrive from the South China Sea. The ferry still crosses. The landscape that created Hong Kong remains visible beneath everything built on top of it. Every era believed it was looking at the real Hong Kong, but none of those versions was final. Hong Kong's greatest resource was never abundant land. There was never enough. Its strength was the ability to adapt when limits became impossible to ignore. When there was no room, it built upward. When there was no land, it reclaimed it. When manufacturing moved away, it changed industries. When surface transport became overloaded, it went underground. Again and again, limitation became architecture. Look across Victoria Harbour tonight. The skyline appears permanent, perfectly engineered, almost inevitable. But it is none of those things. Most of it is younger than the people watching it. Beneath the towers lies a coastline earlier generations would barely recognize. And centuries from now, another person standing in this exact place may see a completely different city. Because Hong Kong was never built once. It was rebuilt every time the old version reached its limits. From coastal communities, to trading port, to manufacturing center, to financial hub, to megacity. And the transformation is still happening. Subscribe for more fixed camera journeys through the rise, destruction, and reinvention of the world's greatest cities. And tell us in the comments, which city should we watch evolve next?